I was standing under a canopy of white magnolias, a glass of champagne in my hand, when my son's new bride turned her head toward the waiter and said loud enough for our table to hear, "The staff can eat in the kitchen." Her eyes didn't touch me. They slid over my shoulder like I was part of the decor, something you walk past without a second thought. My name is Evelyn Carrington. I built Carrington & Co., one of the most sought-after interior design firms on the East Coast. 40 years of my life poured into floor plans, fabric swatches, and boardroom negotiations. I raised my son alone after his father left when Lucas was just 3. I thought I was building a future for him, for us. But in that moment, surrounded by crystal flutes and the scent of imported gardenias, I realized they didn't see me as mother or even as a person. Just a placeholder, a wallet, a name to put on invitations for prestige. Lucas didn't flinch, didn't step in. He kept talking to a venture capitalist about portfolio diversification, his cufflinks catching the afternoon light. Something in my chest tightened, not from sadness, but from clarity. The signs had been there for months, quiet omissions, small slights, but this was deliberate. And I was done pretending not to notice. I set my glass down, the bubbles rising untouched. The laughter from the table dulled behind me as I walked toward the trellis at the edge of the garden. Lavender swayed in the warm Carolina breeze, their scent, sharp and grounding. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. Howard picked up on the second ring. Always punctual. "Evelyn," he greeted. "Cancel the announcement," I said. My voice was steady, almost calm. "The expansion deal, stop it before it leaves the room." A pause, then his clipped reply, "Understood." I slipped the phone back into my bag, watching a honeybee dive into a bloom and disappear. Around me, the music played on light and oblivious. They thought I would smile through anything. They thought wrong. And that was only the first cut. The music from the reception drifted through the garden as I stood behind the trellis, letting the air cool the flush in my face. I had known deep down that this day wouldn't feel like the wedding of my dreams for my son. The signs had been stacking up for months, tiny calculated adjustments that most people would dismiss as nothing. It started when the seating chart for the ceremony came through my email. I wasn't in the front row, not even the second. I was placed behind a family friend of Sabrina's, someone I'd met only once at a charity auction. When I mentioned it to Lucas, he brushed it off. "It's just logistics, Mom," he'd said without looking up from his phone. Then there was the champagne. For decades, at every family celebration, I'd ordered a particular vintage. It was replaced on the reception menu with an organic rosé Sabrina's stylist recommended for the photos. And the printed program, the one that should have said Mother of the Groom, had my name written, like any other guest, Ms. Evelyn Carrington. At first, I told myself it wasn't worth making a scene. I had built a life by being composed in moments that would make others unravel. But sitting through that ceremony, watching Sabrina's spin instructor get a better seat than me, I realized this wasn't a string of oversights. It was a rewrite. They were editing me out of my own family's story. When the waiter cleared my untouched glass earlier, I caught Marion's eye across the aisle. She'd been my assistant for 25 years, the keeper of my calendar, my keys, and more secrets than I'd ever admit. Her expression was as unreadable as always, but the tilt of her chin told me she saw what I saw. By the time Sabrina's comment about staff landed at our table, the decision was already forming in me. The expansion deal Lucas was set to announce that night wasn't just a business move, it was my gift, my stamp of approval. Without it, the future he'd been bragging about would go up in smoke, and I had just decided he wouldn't be getting it. 3 days before the wedding, Marion came into my study holding a cream envelope. "From Sabrina's assistant," she said. I broke the seal and found a neatly typed note thanking me for approving the release of several Carrington family heirlooms for the bridal look. I hadn't approved anything. Marion explained that Sabrina's assistant had bypassed me entirely, contacting my estate manager with the vault security codes already in hand. The list included my grandmother's sapphire ring and my mother's pearl comb, pieces worn by women in my family on boardroom floors in courthouse chambers and, yes, at weddings. They weren't accessories. They were our history. I told Marion to let it happen. She hesitated, then nodded understanding. Sometimes you need to see how far people will go when they think you won't stop them. On the morning of the wedding, I watched Sabrina glide down the aisle, every inch curated. The sapphire flashed on her right hand, the comb gleamed in her curls, catching the light with each turn of her head. She smiled for the cameras as if she had inherited the right to wear them. Hours later after the ceremony, but before the speeches, I sent Marion upstairs. "Bring them back," I said simply. When Marion walked into the bridal suite, Sabrina was in the middle of a photo session. Mrs. Carrington has requested the return of the heirloom items from her personal vault. Marion said, her voice even. Sabrina laughed like it was a misunderstanding. "We're not done with photos yet." "Today," Marion repeated. The room went still. Sabrina's smile froze, her fingers curling tighter around the ring. She removed it slowly, then plucked the comb from her hair and handed both over her jaw tight. Marion slipped them into a velvet pouch and left without another word. By the time she reached me, the party downstairs was in full swing. I opened the pouch, ran my thumb over the sapphire's cool surface. It had outlasted 3 generations' wars and market crashes. It would outlast this, too. This wasn't just about jewelry. It was about reminding them whose name was etched into the foundation they stood on. 2 mornings after the wedding, Marion appeared at my kitchen table with her tablet. She turned the screen toward me. It was an email from Sabrina's wedding planner, subject line, "Final confirmation of registry funds and gift transfers." There were 37 entries: luxury furniture credits, a travel fund for a month-long European honeymoon, custom luggage sets, even a private retreat in Fiji, all listed as gifted by Evelyn Carrington. I hadn't authorized a single one. The total came to well over $50,000, each item already invoiced, some marked as paid. My coffee went cold as I scrolled through the list. This wasn't generosity, it was looting with a smile. "How many have gone through?" I asked. 4 payments processed, the rest pending," Marion said. I picked up the phone and called Howard. "I need every pending wedding-related transfer frozen," I told him. "Effective immediately. List the reason as clerical discrepancies." Howard didn't ask questions. "It'll be done before close of business." That afternoon, Sabrina's assistant emailed Marion. Just a quick note to clarify some confusion regarding the registry contributions. "We noticed a few pending items have been delayed. Would you like us to resend the account numbers?" Marion's reply was 1 line: "Pending review. Please stand by." By the next day, the whispers had started among the guests. At the post-wedding brunch, I overheard a former client murmur, "Did you hear the travel fund bounced?" Another woman, clearly enjoying herself, replied, "I thought Evelyn was covering everything. That's what Sabrina told us." Across the patio, I saw Sabrina's smile tighten, her eyes darting between tables. Lucas stood beside her, laughing too loudly at nothing at all. That night, I went through the registry again, line by line. The excess was almost insulting: monogrammed linens for every day entertaining an annual subscription to a luxury floral service, the Fiji retreat, with a price tag of $18,200. I emailed Howard one last instruction: void all unauthorized items. Future contributions will follow updated estate guidelines. Let them explain to their friends why the honeymoon suite suddenly had to be self-funded. The reception had wound down to scattered conversations and the quiet clink of staff clearing crystal. I'd stepped upstairs to retrieve my wrap from a guest room, the ache in my knees reminding me that heels and marble floors were never a good mix. As I passed the bridal suite, I noticed the door was ajar, light spilling into the hallway. Voices carried sharp familiar. "You said she'd do her gracious matriarch routine and roll over like always," Sabrina snapped. "Well, she didn't," Lucas replied. His tone clipped. "Now half our guests think we can't afford our own honeymoon." There was a pause, then Sabrina again, quieter but sharper. "How long do we have to keep pretending to tolerate her?" My stomach went still. Just long enough for her to slip, Lucas said. She's in her 70s. All we need is one confused statement on record. One missed medication. Something we can take to a judge. It landed like a second betrayal worse than the first. Not just erasing me, but plotting to declare me unfit. She's not going to hand us anything, Sabrina added. You're going to have to take it. She trusts me. Not anymore, Lucas cut in. There was the sound of glass on wood, then Sabrina's voice, low as poison in tea. If we want control, we move before she rewrites everything. Too late. I stood perfectly still until their voices faded and the door clicked shut. Then I turned and walked to my study without a sound, pulling the small voice recorder from my desk drawer. Marion joined me minutes later, her expression unreadable. Time, location, verbatim, I said, clicking the record button. I spoke each word slowly, clearly ending with the date. Marion signed as witness. Within the hour, Howard had a sealed envelope containing our statement. Evidence. Not to be used today, maybe not tomorrow, but ready when needed. They thought they were setting a trap. All they did was give me reason to sharpen my own. I didn't confront them. Not in the hallway, not the next morning, not even when Lucas sent a breezy text about having brunch soon. You don't walk into a storm swinging, you wait until the wind is blowing the way you want it. That week, I asked Marion to arrange a small luncheon at the Charleston Club. 6 women I'd known for decades, each of them as familiar with whispered influence as they were with silver service. Former gallery owners, wives of retired judges, philanthropists who could tilt a fundraiser's success with a single RSVP. We sat beneath a canopy of striped awnings, the scent of lemon verbena in the air. I didn't mention Lucas or Sabrina by name. I didn't need to. Instead, I let a few truths fall into conversation, like pearls slipping off a string. I've decided to step back from the trust board, I said, lightly swirling iced tea in my glass. Legacy fatigue, I suppose. And I'm moving more of my resources into direct women's initiatives, bypassing the family bureaucracy altogether. They nodded, leaning in. When you've given someone everything, I continued, and they still treat you like a vault with opinions, it's time to adjust the estate. There was a small ripple of knowing smiles. No one asked for details. They never do. But by the end of dessert, I'd been handed 2 business cards for national women's foundations and 1 discreet offer to connect with a political action group. By Friday, I'd heard from Marion that Sabrina's charity project had been quietly removed from a corporate sponsorship list. The following week, an annual gala Lucas chaired saw a noticeable dip in confirmed donors. No public reason. No overt connection to me, just the natural shift of tides when people start to wonder whose side will serve them better. Influence doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it just has to whisper in the right rooms. And I had decades of practice. For years, I'd kept a separate portfolio assets tucked away from the glossy presentations Lucas loved to parade in front of investors. Real estate in quiet corners of Savannah, licensing rights to a dormant textile line, small but steady shares in boutique hotel groups. I called them my ghost holdings because they worked best when unseen. Lucas never asked where those tidy quarterly profits came from. To him, they were just numbers on a report proof of his leadership. But the truth was, those successes were scaffolding I had built long before he knew what a balance sheet was. One Tuesday morning, I called Howard. It's time, I said. By Thursday, the hotel group was sold to a buyer in Asheville I'd been cultivating for months. The textile brand rights, once earmarked for a creative passion project of Sabrina's, were reassigned to a nonprofit I'd quietly founded that very morning. A handful of smaller properties shifted into private trusts under my name alone. It wasn't a slash and burn. It was a precision cut, one thread at a time, enough to create a tremor without drawing blood in public. By the end of the week, Marion brought me a printout of the latest board agenda. Lucas has requested a closed session to address irregularities in the portfolio, she said. Howard called later that afternoon. Do you want to attend? No, I told him. Let him explain the holes without me there to fill them. That evening, I sat on the porch with a glass of chilled Chardonnay, watching the river catch the last light. Somewhere across town, my son was scrambling to account for numbers he never truly owned. In business, as in life, people assume what's in their hands is theirs. I had just reminded him that some things only ever belonged to me. The letter arrived 2 days later, slid under the heavy oak door of my study. My name was written across the envelope in Lucas's careful, almost old-fashioned handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the desk while I finished reviewing the quarterly reports for the foundation. When I finally tore it open, the paper inside smelled faintly of the cologne I used to buy him every Christmas. "Mother," it began, "I don't understand what's happening. I've worked so hard to keep this family strong, to honor what you built. I know Sabrina has made mistakes, but she's trying. We're trying. Please, let's talk." It was almost touching until I thought about the voice I'd overheard upstairs at the wedding. The same son who plotted to use my age as a weapon was now asking for understanding. Marion found me still holding the letter, my thumb pressed into the crease of the paper. "You all right?" she asked. "I'm thinking," I said, about how I handed him everything without ever making him earn it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of those words settling between us. Then I reached for the phone and called Howard. "I want the licensing proceeds from the textile brand directed to transitional housing grants for single mothers," I told him. There was a beat, then his voice warmed. "That will sting." "Good," I said. "Let the Carrington name mean something again." That night, I placed Lucas's letter in the bottom drawer of my desk beneath copies of old architectural plans and photographs from the company's early days. I didn't throw it away. Some reminders are worth keeping, not for sentiment, but for clarity. He thought this was about money. It never was. It was about the responsibility that comes with it and the cost when you forget who gave it to you. It was a warm Thursday afternoon when Marion stepped into my study. "Lucas is here," she said. "Alone." I considered making him wait, but curiosity won. We met in the back garden where the magnolia trees threw shifting shadows across the brick path. He looked thinner, though not in a way that comes from discipline, more like something had been leaking out of him for weeks. "Thank you for seeing me," he began, hands buried in his pockets. I nodded, letting the breeze fill the silence. "I'm not here to ask for money or access," he said quickly. I want to make things right. Start over. Start over." I repeated, tasting the words. "You want to rewind?" He frowned. "Isn't that the same thing?" "No," I said. "Starting over means building something new. Rewinding means pretending the damage never happened." He looked down, scuffing his shoe against the brick. I didn't think it mattered that much. The seating chart. The ring. "I thought you were above it." I took a slow breath. "You thought legacy meant a name on the wall. It doesn't. It's memory. And you let her rewrite mine." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this in an old drawer from when I was little. I thought you should have it." I unfolded it carefully, a crayon drawing of me in an apron holding a tray of cookies. "My mommy is a boss" was scrawled at the top, the O in boss shaped like a heart. Something in me tightened, but I handed it back. "I remember her. But she doesn't live in the same house as the woman you treated like an ATM. His voice caught. "So this is it." I met his eyes. "Sorry isn't a door, Lucas. It's a mirror." He looked away first. We didn't shake hands. We didn't hug. Some things once cut clean are better left untied. The decision to leave the company wasn't made in a burst of anger. It was a slow, deliberate unraveling, like untying a knot that had been in place for decades. One Friday before sunrise, Marion and I walked into my corner office at Carrington & Cosa with empty boxes and a clear plan. 42 years of my life were packed into those boxes' sketchbooks from my first residential project, fabric swatches yellowed with age awards tucked into protective sleeves, ledgers from the years when every cent had to be earned twice. We labeled each one in Marion's precise handwriting, Legacy, Private. The only thing I left behind was the brass nameplate on my desk, Evelyn Carrington Founder, past tense. By mid-morning, Howard had the press release ready. It read exactly as I'd instructed. After decades of leadership, Evelyn Carrington is stepping down from Carrington & Co. She will continue her work through the Carrington Initiative, a philanthropic foundation supporting women in design education and entrepreneurship. No mention of Lucas, no mention of family, just me and the future I was choosing. We drove straight from the office to my new home, a cedar-shingled cottage on the lake, far enough from Charleston that the air smelled of pine and water instead of city heat. While Marion unpacked the reading nook, my phone rang. Unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. "Hi, Mom." His voice was tired, stripped of its usual polish. "Can we meet?" Not to ask for anything, just to talk. Just us. I said yes, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I needed to see what he looked like, without the armor of boardrooms and her shadow at his side. We agreed to meet halfway, and as I hung up, I realized I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. I was simply ready. The morning the final statement went out, the lake was so still it looked like glass. I sat on the porch with my tea, the press release already in every major outlet before the sun had cleared the tree line. After 4 decades building a family business, Evelyn Carrington has chosen to divest completely from Carrington & Co. She has no further financial, legal, or advisory ties to the company. The $30 million previously earmarked for expansion will be redirected to the Carrington Initiative, supporting education and entrepreneurship opportunities for women of color. That last line was for Sabrina. I didn't name her. I never would. But she knew. By midday, the headlines were rolling in matriarch withdraws from Carrington Empire redirects millions. Evelyn Carrington retires with grace and teeth. Lucas's name was absent from all of them. Around 2 o'clock, Marion came out with her phone. "Mrs. Aldridge is here," she said, smiling faintly. Margaret Aldridge had been my friend and occasional rival for 30 years. She stepped onto the porch, carrying a tin of lemon bars. So old-fashioned, it might as well have been an heirloom. "You've done it," she said, lowering herself into the chair beside me. Dropped the match without even blinking. "Matches don't scare me," I said. "I've been through the fire already." She sipped her tea. "Lucas called me. Says he's taking time away. And Sabrina, she's gone. Filed for separation last week." I didn't react. Inside, it felt like the final page turning. "Did you ever love him less for all this?" she asked. "No," I said. "I just stopped protecting the illusion he built around himself." Later, Marion and I walked the shoreline. She asked what I wanted engraved on the cornerstone of the foundation's headquarters. I thought for a moment. "Tell the truth," I said, "even if it costs you everything." She wrote it down. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the company, or the family name, or the house that had forgotten how to hold love. I was thinking about the water, the wind, and how it felt to be entirely my own again.